Hi, my name is Madison Clausen, and I am a graduate student at Morningside College University, and I'm a third grade teacher at Hunt Elementary School. My research study was to see the effects of improving fluency with music, developing fluency skills among third grade students through the use of a musical beat. The problem statement. This study followed the Read Naturally intervention program, which focuses on increasing students' reading fluency rates and accuracy rates. Students were asked to read with musical beats to increase their fluency rate and accuracy throughout this research study. And this research study intervention block time, the researcher met with their participants 30 minutes Monday through Friday each day from 2:45 to 3:15 p.m. The participants in this study were chosen based off of their winter FAST CBMR assessment data. The teachers at this target school used this probe to identify and determine what reading intervention is needed, and the participants in this study needed to follow the Read Naturally intervention to improve their reading fluency rate and accuracy rates throughout the year. Why did I choose this topic? Hunt A+ Arts Integrated School is where I teach. We focus on the 4 components of art, dance, visual arts, drama, and music, and we integrate that into the content area knowledge of the students. Reading fluency is important to our district as well. The district looks at our FAST CBMR data to see which schools and which classrooms are meeting the needs of their students, as well as which classrooms are getting readers proficient. The impact. Low fluency rate can cause comprehension rates to be lowered. If, for example, if students are breaking apart phrasing in sentences, they cannot fully comprehend what that sentence is trying to tell them, and so that is why their comprehension rates can be impacted by low fluency rates. Poor fluency rates can affect autistic learners' social skills. Again, breaking apart sentences and reading word for word or communicating word for word can be hard for teachers and as well as classmates understand what their classmates are trying to say. And low fluency rates can affect students' word automaticity and reading decoding rates. Past interventions. The first intervention was conducted in 2012, which had 30 third grade students that were split into 2 groups. The control group followed the Read Naturally program procedures normally, and the experimental group eliminated the repeated reading portion of the Read Naturally procedures. The Dibbles assessment was used, and a pre-test and a post-test was given to these 30 third grade students. The results of the study concluded that the control group from the pre-test to the post-test increased 15.38 words per minute, and the experimental group had an increase of 19.39 words per minute from the pre-test to the post-test. As you can see, based on the results, there was not a significant difference in eliminating the repeated reading or keeping the repeated reading of this study. The past intervention number 2 was conducted in 2012. 6 Spanish lingual participants with low reading abilities was studied. Small group versus one-on-one instruction was studied, and 5 out of the 6 participants showed that one-on-one instruction and our small group instruction was effective for their reading fluency scores. So this study wanted to determine small group versus one-on-one instruction, which one was better, and if the students were going to be affected by the way that they were taught. The intervention number 3 was conducted in 2019. The study the effects of repeated reading and direct constructive feedback had on one struggling reader. The results confirmed the strategy to be effective. So the results of the study found that repeated reading with the direct constructive feedback was effective for this student. The student's number of miscues decreased and his fluency scores increased. The theory that I used in this study was B.F. Skinner's theory of operant conditioning, which uses consequences and reinforcement as a determiner for students' behaviors. So in this study, the participants will learn to read passages with musical beats in hopes that their reading fluency will be increased. the participants will have reinforcements within this study. So, for example, the 10-second drum solos, if a student increases their scores from their cold read to their hot read of their Read Naturally passages, they can have a 10-second drum solo at the end of the class. Researchers praise for increased fluency rates, so the researcher will praise the students for increasing their fluency rates from their cold read to their hot read passages, and their learned behavior to increase their prosody or expression through the use of musical beats. Music helps that expression be taught and learned, so in hopes that the students will transfer that over to reading passages. Creating goals for themselves is also a reinforcement. Students are wanting to reach their goal from their cold read to their hot read in hopes that they get above or hit their goal or above their goal, and seeing their reading fluency increase on their Read Naturally graphs. If participants did not increase their fluency, participants cannot participate in the drum solo, but had to tell the researcher on how they could improve next time. So that would be kind of a consequence from the theory of operant conditioning. Goals and objectives of this research project. The purpose of this qualitative research study was to determine the impact of a musical beats reading intervention on third grade students' reading fluency scores. The hypothesis of this study was that the participants' DIBELS reading assessment scores will be positively impacted as a result of the musical beats reading intervention. The variables, the independent variables, is the use of the Read Naturally intervention without musical beats first and with musical beats, so the baseline phase and the experimental phase. And the dependent variables are the student's assessment DIBELS results. Possible impact that this research study will have is that the results of this study can be used to help teachers make instructional decisions about teaching reading fluency instruction. It will give teachers another strategy to use to help increase students' reading fluency, and hopefully will engage students more. And another possible impact is that my work as a researcher will be impacted by whether or not I continue to use musical beats to teach reading fluency and how I select interventions in the future. Methodology. 6 total students in the study from 2 third grade classrooms of similar demographics. The third grade participants in the reading fluency intervention group, there were no special education students. 4 English language learners were participants, varying economic and racial backgrounds, and students received similar scores on their Winterfast CVMR assessment. The materials needed to conduct this research experiment was the Read Naturally reading intervention curriculum as well as the DIBELS assessment. Within the Read Naturally reading intervention curriculum, there were leveled passages. These participants started at a 4.0, which would be 4th grade passages. Student packets the passages in their packets. The students had their own graphs. Red and blue crayons. The blue represented the cold reads on their graphs, and the red represented the hot reads on their graphs. And kitchen timers for students to work on individually in their repeated reading procedure of the Read Naturally procedures. In the DIBELS, they needed to have 3rd grade assessment passages. There were 3 of them. And then the educator script and the recording sheet to record the miscues and their scores. Read Naturally procedures. These were followed every day for 30 minutes. Like I said at the beginning of this presentation, our intervention time was 2:45 to 3:15 each day. Each day we followed the Read Naturally procedures, which included reviewing keywords and definitions, writing a prediction of the passage before reading the passage, the cold read of their passage, which was colored in blue on their Read Naturally graphs, teacher read aloud of the passage 3 times while the students followed along in their passages. Students' practice of the passage, so that is where the kitchen timers came into play. The students read this 5 to 10 times depending on the day. Completion of the comprehension questions over the passages, summary of the passage, and the hot read of the passage, which was colored in red on their Read Naturally graphs. The way the researcher analyzed the data was 3 test times using the Dibbles assessment were analyzed by the researcher, test 1, test 2, and test 3. 2 t-tests were conducted to determine the effects of the study. The means of the participants' fluency scores were compared on a figure, and the third grade spring benchmark score was 125 words per minute. So the researcher wanted that the participants to reach that 125 words per minute. The results of the study, as you can see, this is the dependent samples t-test for test 1, test 2, and test 3 fluency scores. There was a significant and statistically significant growth increase from test 2 to test 3 with a 9.707. As you can see, from test 1 to test 2, they still increased, not as drastic as the test 2, test 3. This did, the results did confirm my hypothesis based on the t-tests, as well as the means of the participants' fluency scores in this figure will also represent and prove and confirm that my hypothesis to be correct. The test 1, as you can see, it has the error bars denote 1 standard deviation. Test 1, the students were not at the end of the year benchmark score of 125. By the end of test 2, they were still not at the end of the year benchmark of 125 words per minute. But by test 3, they exceeded the score of 125 words per minute. So they did meet the end of the year benchmark score by the end of test 3. Implications, limitations, and recommendations. So the connections to past research number 1. So the past research study number 1 was the 33rd graders read naturally on repeated reading versus non-repeated reading. This study did not support this study's hypothesis. The research found that in the current study, repeated reading with musical beats did help the participants' reading fluency scores. Practicing multiple times with musical beats reinforced the participants' knowledge of the passage, so practicing 5 to 10 times really did help in the students' hot read scores. Providing the participants with their own timer during their repeated reading reinforced more practicing from the participants. The participants were more engaged when there was a timer. The participants were improving their reading fluency scores with the repeated reading procedure from their cold reads to their hot reads. So again, the repeated reading did really help the students throughout, the participants throughout this study. Connections to past research number 2. One-on-one instruction versus the small group instruction for 6 students was that study. This did support this study's hypothesis. The research found in the current study, small group instruction was beneficial to the participants' reading fluency scores. The researcher thought it was easier to give direct feedback to the small group rather than a whole group setting. The researcher was able to focus on the individuals more in the group rather than having 20 other students coming up to the group. And it was easier classroom management within a small group rather than a whole group setting as well, less distractions. And participants were able to work independently with lessened distractions from peers. So students were able to go around the room and really focus on their reading rather than being distracted from their other peers. And connections to past research number 3. This research was how direct feedback and repeated reading helped a struggling student. This study, the past research study number 3, did support this study's hypothesis, and the researcher found that in this current study, the participants took and applied the feedback to their own reading. The participants reflected on their own reading with the direct feedback. So after the researcher gave direct feedback to the participants, they were able to reflect later on while they were still practicing. And the participants were practicing with integrity. Again, they were not distracted from other peers. They were really practicing and wanting to improve their reading fluency rate. The participants were engaged while using the musical beats, and the more creativity from the participants was definitely a big one from this research past research number 3. The students were becoming more creative with their musical beats and wanting to create their own at the end of the passage. The participants were able to give the researcher examples of how they can better their reading fluency with the musical beats. They were the ones who were able to tell that. The researcher didn't have to give constant feedback. They were the ones who were giving feedback to themselves. The B.F. Skinner theory of operant conditioning, the researcher found connections to the theory. More motivation was increased with their reading fluency scores, so that was a reinforcement. They wanted to create their own beats to read at the end of the story. The participants responded to the individual feedback. Like I said in the past slide, they were able to tell the researcher how they can better themselves. The researcher praised the participants for increasing their fluency scores. That's another reinforcement that we talked about. More, if not all, participants were able to do the 10-second drum solo, and less participants had the consequence of having to tell the researcher how to better their reading fluency scores. As a consequence, they were able to do the 10-second drum solo rather than having the consequence of not participating in the 10-second drum solo. Impact on students and teachers. Having evidence from this research study can help teachers on how to incorporate music into their daily instruction. Like I said before, Hunt A+ Arts School, elementary school, focuses on arts daily, and this will give them another strategy to use and how to incorporate music into daily instruction. Teachers create a positive impact on student achievement. Students learn through music. This is another engaging strategy to teach reading fluency. Students understand why it is important to take part in this process, so they are now understanding why it's so important to increase their reading fluency score and reading fluency rate and accuracy. So they are taking a part of that. This may help motivate other students to get out of their comfort zone, so not just the participants in this research study, but it may motivate other students outside of this research study to get out of their comfort zone and try different musical beats to read to, and provide students with another reading strategy to help students become proficient readers. So this just adds to their toolbox of many strategies to use. There are also limitations of this study. For example, the sample size of only 6 students were studied. Additional classes will yield additional research data. The second one is that only high-level learners were studied in this research study. Due to the nature of Read Naturally Level 4.0, only the highest achieving students receive interventions regularly. So in this study, only the high-level learners were studied, and these participants have been doing Read Naturally since 2nd grade, so they already understand all the Read Naturally procedures. Read Naturally intervention was the only curriculum used to study if musical beats has a positive impact. Other curricula may experience higher or lower growth. With only Read Naturally intervention being studied, there is no comparison of interventions to make note of. Another limitation is that the teacher's background and training with the Read Naturally intervention could limit the validity of the research. Training for the Read Naturally took place via coworker observations and the use of training procedures and coworker discussions. So the researcher was not trained by a certified trainer, which may have led to different results. Classroom interruptions is another limitation. Due to the intervention timing at the end of the day, the office calls may disrupt the intervention instruction, so the participants of this study could have different results if the time of the day of the intervention time of the day would have been different. The classroom also has regular visits who may disrupt intervention instruction as well. Another limitation is natural student growth. It could be argued that the growth of the students experienced during the 4-week intervention was a result of natural growth coupled with daily core instruction. So was the results of this study based on the musical beats or natural student growth? And the last one is administrating of the assessments. With only 3 1-minute Dibbles passages, the passages must be administered with carefully controlled instructions and testing environments. Each assessment is given at the same time each of the 4 weeks at the same time of the day. A script was used to make sure the environment was consistent with for the sake of this research study. Overall recommendations, continued research to strengthen and validate the findings of this study would need to be conducted to make sure that the findings of the study are validated. The studies on the impact of music on students from all learning levels, so not just the high achieving students as in this research study, but from all learning levels to see the impact that music really has on students' reading fluency scores. The use of different research-based intervention strategies to test if musical beats is beneficial to student progress. So we want to make sure that we're using another research reading fluency intervention to make sure that we are that this this research is validated. And teacher studies to determine if certified training in music instruction will impact on student growth. So not just certified training in reading fluency, but as well as music instruction will have on the impact of student growth. Here are a list of my references. Overall, this research project and study has confirmed my hypothesis that musical beats has a positive impact on students' reading fluency rates and accuracy rates among third grade students. The results also confirm that the students met the end of the year benchmark score of 125 words per minute. They were not proficient at the beginning of the study, but the musical beats did help them get to the end of the year benchmark score. And this also provides teachers and students with a fun and engaging way to teach reading fluency and provides another strategy for teaching. Thank you for listening and have a great night.